Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train, episode 209. Today we have, well, actually, we're kind of scatterbrained with what we're working on today. I spent a lot of time on the mountain here, but I eventually sort of run out of steam with it because as the mountain gets taller, it gets tougher and tougher to make progress on it. It takes so much more time to bring the area around it up to the right level, and I'm not quite at the point where I want to level out, where I want to sort of send a wave down and level everything out yet. And also, I feel like if I decided to terrain track it first and then add stuff, which sort of would be my, it's my first idea as to what to do, I don't think it would give me the results I really want. So, anyways, we do this, we do some other stuff, we work on some narrow gauge things, and today, episode 209, I can't remember where the question came from. I'm gonna be completely honest. I wrote it down and then sometime later, sometime later I realized I didn't write down a source for it, and so now I just have the question, which is something about plumbing, because I just write down a little abbreviation and where it came from so I can go look it up myself during the episode, as you guys know. Anyways. So this episode is about plumbing. It's about plumbing on the train. And I'll start off with the things that I've said before, that I can remember saying before, which are, right off the bat, we started... Okay, so you have a few things. When you're on the train, you need fresh water, you need that to be distributed, you need to be stored somewhere. You need train line steam for heating in the coaches. The problem is the coaches were not right up against the engine like they probably should have been. And we realized that pretty quickly, but we sort of jerry-rigged our own system, which I'll get to in a second. And I guess electricity counts in plumbing, but the whole electrical system of the train was something else to behold. Anyways, the first thing is the caboose had radios. It was largely just powered by a battery. There was a stove in the caboose for heat, and there were windows in the caboose that you could open if you wanted air conditioning. Aside from that, they were kind of on their own out there. The foundry, which was one of the boxcars, was very similar, in the sense that it was basically on its own. I suppose that also had a battery, and it would just get traded into the battery bank when they needed power. And they didn't need... or they had their own cistern for water, which didn't need to be particularly clean water. It wasn't for drinking. So anyways. We had a few things that did use water on the train. A few things that used water pretty heavily. But train line steam, like I said, was an issue because there was space. There was usually at least 2 cars, typically 3 or 4, in the way, in between the engine and the coaches. And so we ended up having to jerry-rig our own connection of electricity in some cases, intercom lines, because some of the stuff was wireless, some of it was not. And, like I said, train line steam along the side of the hoppers or whatever we were using. Generally, we would stick with the same cars if we could get away with it. But we had brackets that we would fasten onto the side of the hoppers and the side of the tank car, and these would hold up the cables and the pipes, because we were just using flexible hose and, obviously, flexible cable to pass steam and electricity. So, once that was all hooked up, then we could get power to the cars, which the electricity in the cars was not run off the locomotive's dynamo most of the time. Originally it was set up to do that, but the dynamo was not really powerful enough to run what we needed to run, other than the lighting in all the cars. All of the pumps, all of the there was a stovetop, although I don't remember if... I believe part of it was electricity and part of it was gas, and they would go back and forth. There was a propane sort of grill. One of the cars was set up to be a diner, so to speak. I could talk in depth about the way we converted these cars. We sort of, there were I think 7 or 8 pretty generic Pullmans and one sort of beat up coach that ended up becoming a hydroponics lab sort of thing. And that had its own water source. That was almost independent. But the electricity that went through the cars was found to be grossly inadequate coming from the dynamo. It would basically not do anything. So we realized we needed a generator first off. So we got a generator. The generator sat in the radio room as we were tearing all of the seats out of that coach and building desks and putting in radio equipment and stuff like that. We stuck a radar, like a weather radar on the roof, and some other high-powered antennas, stuff like that. We would push the generator kind of to its limit. And later we realized, okay, obviously the generator burns a lot of gas. Early on, gas was not too hard to find, but obviously it got scarce, as I've discussed many a time, and depending on something that you cannot make more of, or something that you cannot readily find, is not smart. So we ended up building what was called the battery bank. And this was a bank of, I think, 24 batteries, like car batteries, that were hooked up in parallel. And they were regulated, of course, but they provided more than enough amperage for anything we needed to do on the train. Everything on the train was more or less, it was either redone to handle a 12-volt input, or we just had sort of smaller transformers all around. If a piece of equipment needed to be run off something else, that would be hooked up. We managed to jerry-rig our electrical solutions off of this thing, but it generally did the same as... Well, the generator was originally a house generator, so it did AC. We had to convert that. We got the thing producing DC. We had a motor. A dynamo, really. It's, just a motor when you're running it the other way. But it was a dynamo, and it was hooked around... It had a belt that was looped around one of the axles in the radio room coach. And when we weren't running the generator and we didn't need the battery bank, things were powered off of that. And that was used to charge the battery bank when we weren't wanting to run the generator or when we were moving. So it was important to keep moving because that gave us power. So we had this dynamo. The dynamo would feed the battery bank. And in the night, we either switch over to the battery bank, or if that was running low, we'd switch over to the generator. But that, again, I could probably go into much more depth about how the electricity worked, but this was really supposed to be an episode about plumbing, so I will talk about that very, sort of for the rest of the 5 or 6 minutes we have here. Now, train line steam was piped through all the coaches. They were ready for it, so that was fine. That was already done. Now, the water, on the other hand, was stored. You know how the older style heavyweights, they were heavyweights, the Pullmans have sort of vaulted roofs. We added cisterns in the roofs, and in some cases underneath the coaches as well, because center of gravity, we didn't want anything to tip over. So most of the time it was under, unless we needed something to be gravity fed. So in the roof of the barracks, in the car that became the barracks, there was a cistern, and that fed directly, gravity fed the small section that was delegated to be essentially a little showering area, which is, we pulled up pretty much everything, brought in tile, did what we could to keep it sealed. It didn't always work like that, but it held in the water decently, and that fed a tank down underneath that we used as a gray water system. But the toilets were not really toilets. They were sort of what you'd expect from an older railroad coach. It was just a hole, and it was use these mostly when we're out on the road. If not, do the camping thing and go dig yourself a hole. Occasionally, when we worked with the military, sometimes you'd have people digging/building latrines, which was good to have. The diner used a lot of water, stored a lot of water. Some of it was potable, some of it was not. The potable water was stored separately, but they were both stored underneath the cars. They were both stored underneath the car. In whatever space we could find there. We were sacrificing ground clearance, but that wasn't really a big deal. And the potable water was hand pumped up at the car, and typically the non-potable water was hand pumped up to wherever they needed it as well. But there was a electrical pump on that if need be, because that was where a lot of our water storage was, underneath the diner, or in the roof of the diner as well. The diner was quite a heavy coach after everything got installed in it. And that was our source for firefighting water, although we did basically hoard fire extinguishers. For the most part, though, water that was used in each coach was confined to each coach. The shower had its water supply, the diner had its water supplies, and no other coach except for the hydroponics lab, I believe, had a major water supply. Actually, I believe the hospital had one. That was hand pumped, that was stored underneath, and that was let's keep this as sterile as possible style water. Because that was used for whatever. When you're out on the train like that, injuries just sort of happen. So we didn't have too much in the way of complexity. We did not have hot water. Now that came as a disappointment immediately. We originally did not have hot water, and then I realized, well, if we pull a line off of the steam line, run it through the tank in the roof of the barracks car, then we can have heated water there, and we did the same thing with some of the water that was stored in the diner as well, because having hot water, especially for cleaning purposes, is really kind of important. And in some cases we would just pull, we had steam no matter where, so we would just pull train line steam off if we needed something. The train line steam did not really have the pressure to do very much, but it was nice to have sort of just steam that you could blast at things to clean or whatever. We threw around the idea towards the beginning of actually just having all the water from the tender get pumped, turned into steam, run through the train line steam, and then condensed out where you needed it. But that was deemed horribly impractical and massively inefficient as well, because then you're just slowly draining the train line steam, you're just losing boiler pressure all the time. We originally kicked around the idea of having a steam generator car, but after the battery, like a steam-powered generator car, but the train made enough steam for everything we wanted to do with steam, and after we got the battery bank and the dynamo running, there was really no need to have a special car for that to burn some fuel, which, we ran out of fuel plenty of times. Or, we ran low, had to use wood or charcoal or whatever we had on hand. But it wasn't, nothing on the train was too massively complicated. The electrical system was probably the messiest thing we ever designed, but the water and getting it places, that was not the worst thing we ever built. We had, most of the cars had the ability to catch rain as well, so that's how we got our clean water. We also had a steam-powered pump with a hose so we could pull out of a river or something like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you a little more next week with whatever the next question is. Trainman out.